Have a little look at question 4 from the 2023 Junior Cycle History exam, and this question is all about the Easter Rising or the 1916 Rising. So question 4 was worth 44 marks, but again, this wasn't written on the paper, so you wouldn't have known that. 14 of the marks, the answers you could find or obtain using these sources, and then 30 marks were for content that you would have learned in class. So it says, the following two sources relate to the Easter Rising, which started on Monday, the 24th of April, 1916. Study the sources and answer the questions which follow. Source 1 is an account by a member of the Irish Volunteers who was in the GPO during the Rising, and then source 2 is a photograph of the GPO after the Rising had ended. So question A. According to source 1, what was the impact of enemy shelling on the GPO on Thursday? And this was worth 4 marks. So you got 2 marks for each point that you made, okay? Again, it doesn't say how many points you need to include. So a good rule of thumb is just make sure you fill the writing space available. So it says, according to source 1, there was no direct hit throughout the day. The heat from the burning buildings meant the window fortifications had to be kept wet. Question B. According to source 1, why did the volunteers evacuate the GPO on Friday evening? And again, there was 4 marks for this, okay? So 2 marks and 2 marks. And again, kind of 2 points, fill your writing space available. So shells began to pour into the GPO and fires broke out in various sections. And again, we're quoting from the source given. Question C. Is source 1 a primary source or a secondary source? Give a reason for your answer. And this is worth 6 marks. So you got 3 marks for saying that it was a primary source, and then 3 marks for your reasoning. And this was on a sliding scale. 3 marks for very good, 2 marks for good, 1 mark for poor, and 0 marks if it's incorrect or irrelevant. So we said that it's a primary source, so you get 3 marks, and then our reason is, this is a primary source because it was written by a member of the Irish Volunteers who was in the GPO during the Easter Rising, meaning it is a first-hand account of what happened, okay? And again, all of that information about who wrote the source, it's all up here in the caption, okay? So it says that it's an account by a member of the Irish Volunteers who was there during the Rising. Question D. In relation to the events of the GPO during the 1916 Rising, what are 2 ways in which the visual evidence from source 2 supports the written evidence of source 1? And there is 6 marks for this, and you must link between both sources, okay? So you had to give kind of 2 reasons, all right? And I have numbered them just to make sure that I've done both of them so that I haven't left anything out. And then each answer was marked on a sliding scale out of 3. So to start off, I've said source 2 shows the walls of the GPO blackened by smoke or soot, which is evidence of the fire described in source 1. And then we have our quote from source 1, which says, the building was alight in every quarter. Then the second way, I've said the piles of debris shown in the bottom left-hand corner of source 2 is evidence of the shells mentioned in source 1. And again, if we go back to our sources, so there's evidence of the smoke, okay, the blackened walls, all right, and there's evidence of the debris. Okay, and then up here, heat from burning buildings, all right, and here it mentions shells. Okay, if we go over the page, apart from the Rising, what else can source 2 tell us about life in Dublin in 1916? And there was 6 marks for this, so you got 3 marks for kind of each reason that you gave. So again, the question doesn't say you have to give 2 reasons, but a good kind of rule of thumb is to fill the writing space available, and you'd fit more than 1 reason in here, okay? So it says source 2 tells us about the clothing that was worn at the time. Men are in suits with waistcoats and flat caps. Women are in long dresses or cloaks. It also tells us about the transportation, as you can see trams on the right-hand side of the photo. Okay, so again, if we go back to our sources, there we can see the clothing, okay, so we can see they're wearing trousers and jackets, okay. We can see this guy has kind of a waistcoat underneath, and they nearly all have flat caps on. Then if we look at the women here, you can see they're in kind of long dresses with long cloaks, all right, and there are trams pictured there, okay. So question F is a pretty short one. Name 2 leaders who signed the 1916 Proclamation of Independence. And there were 6 marks for this, 3 marks for each. There were 7 signatories, so you just needed to name 2. So I've just gone with Porrick Pierce and Joseph Plunkett, but obviously you could choose any of those who signed. So our last question here, explain 2 consequences of the 1916 Rising. There was 12 marks for this. Now what's interesting is you got 3 marks for naming each consequence, and then you got 3 marks for explaining each consequence. So even if you couldn't explain it, if you could just name it, you could still get your 3 marks for that. And then the explanation was marked on a sliding scale. So 3 marks for very good, 2 for good, 1 for poor, and 0 if it was incorrect or irrelevant or wrong. So the first consequence that I've gone with is death and destruction. Around 500 people were killed, and about 2,500 people were injured, and there was about £3 million worth of property damage done. So again, I've clearly named the consequence and then I've explained it. And the second consequence I've gone with is the rise of Sinn Féin. Okay, so I've named the consequence, and then my explanation is Sinn Féin was not involved in the rising, but newspapers mistakenly called it the Sinn Féin Rising, which led to greater support for the party. So there's my explanation.